Can you describe a normal work day for me?
Okay, a normal work day would be rise pretty early and take a good shower and then have a nice breakfast. Go fight the traffic to get to the job, and then do your very best. So that's the way a normal work day would go. Of course, you take your lunch break, and at the end of the day, you just sort of do the reverse of what you were doing that morning, of getting back home and then being ready to be at home with your family and reflect some on the day. What were the good things that happened? What were some things that you can improve on? Get ready for the next day. So that's a normal process.
All right. And can you tell me what you did for NASA? What some of the contributions you made for them and everything like that?
Well, it was a wonderful career. I just happened to be prepared for going into NASA. I came out of Georgia Tech, a college in Atlanta, with a good engineering degree. And so at that point in time, NASA was needing engineers, and I happened to be close enough by the NASA here in Huntsville, Alabama, that kept hearing about these Germans, this crazy bunch of Germans over in Huntsville talking about going to the moon. So even though I had three little kids at that point, I thought I've got to go find out what NASA is all about. So that's how I got into NASA. I went over and applied, was hired immediately, went back to the job that I had, and gave them 2 weeks notice. And so that 2 weeks passed, and I reported into NASA and had a wonderful career. Now, some of the things that I learned at NASA is not only do you need to be prepared educationally, you need to be prepared emotionally and operate and function as a team player. So it's not just one person that put man on the moon. It was a whole team of people. And the team is what works together day in and day out. And what that does is that brings all the background that I had as a kid, all the other person had as a kid coming through their background, what this kid had, and we all got our education, and then we all came together with varying backgrounds, but it just worked out wonderfully well.
All right. And have you stayed in touch with any astronauts? If so, what are they currently doing?
Interesting question. The three astronauts that live here in Huntsville have all retired out of the active astronaut program now. There are two guys and one female. One of the males did report in and was on orbit, stayed in our first space station, and lived 30 days in orbit with two other astronauts. So he is retired, but is still very involved here in the community with volunteer kind of work. The other two, a lady and a gentleman, they are involved as well here in the community with volunteer work in schools, trying to help children and young teenagers have a purpose in life of setting a goal and then getting prepared educationally as well as mature-wise to be involved in a program. Wonderful experience.
Okay, thank you. And what have you done with the knowledge you've gathered from working with NASA?
Well, I think the thing that I have learned out of that is at the very high levels in any organization are the ones that set the goals for that organization. And that's true of the government as well. President Kennedy came to Huntsville in the early 60s, 1960s, and after he was exposed to what we were doing here, he set the national goal of we, the United States, would go to the moon and return man safely to Earth. And that's exactly what we did. And every state in the United States had some part in the program. That was by design and on purpose. So what that taught me is, again, it's a team of not only maybe just a few people, working on a small problem, but then it's a huge program set for the United States, and that was the big team, and it still functioned very, very well, and we accomplished what we set out to do. So that's some of the things that I retained through all of the rest of my career is that teamwork.
Okay. And how did you come into this career?
Well, just being pretty lucky, in all honesty. I just happened to live on my first job out of college about 25 miles from Huntsville. And that's when I could hear on the radio. And at that point in time, TV was pretty limited, but we could hear some of the news reports and the newspapers that were talking about that the government was looking at going to the moon. So I told my wife, I said, hey, I know we've got 3 young kids, but that's something I want to go look at. So I just volunteered and came over and made the application and became successful.
All right. So have you always been interested in space?
Not initially, because the first satellite was put up by Russia, and I was still in college when that happened in the late 50s. So I remember hearing about that, but I never dreamed, honestly, that I would ever be a part of the United States space program. But it just so happened that my first job positioned me just 25 miles from where Huntsville is, and so that's how I got to be involved with the NASA program.
All right. So what do you have to say to the people that believe that the moon landing is fake?
Well, for a long time there were a lot of people, and my grandmother was one of those. She did not think that we could go to the moon. She didn't think that we ought to go to the moon. She thought that was just something fake. Now she grew up, way back when. She was born in the late 1800s. So she remembered the first car that she ever saw and that kind of thing. And then to transplant that with the thought of going to the moon was just beyond anything she could comprehend. But I kept reassuring her, yes, grandmother, we are going to go to the moon. And so we didn't quite make it. She didn't live long enough to really know that we did. But, it was something that you just had to reassure them that it's real. We really did do that.
All right. And do you remember any takeoffs? What was the atmosphere like during the takeoffs?
Oh my goodness. Again, our family was fortunate because my wife and I and all 3 kids were at Cape Canaveral, as it was known in the early days. We were at the Cape whenever that launch occurred that morning. We had spent the night out there on the beach. We were somewhat removed from the actual launch site, but we still could see in the distance because of the very flat terrain there and the low-growing shrubbery and trees that we could still see the rocket or the missile standing vertically with all the floodlights on it. And so it was a little bit of a restless night because of just the conditions we found ourselves in. But it was very exciting because we knew that unless we had a hold on the countdown, that we would launch early in the morning. And sure enough, it all went well. And so all 3 kids got to be your mother, for example, or your brother, or your father was there whenever we launched. So they did get to witness that. Very exciting, very exciting.
All right. Speaking of family, how did your career affect your life and your family's life altogether?
Well, altogether, it made me appreciate the dream of setting goals, and then the expanded dream of accomplishing something. So you may not get all of the goal that you establish as a goal, but you're going to get something improved over where you are. So I think goal setting for individuals goal setting for teams, goal setting for an organization is very important. It's just like you're in school now, you've got a goal. You're going to graduate, then you're going to go to college, you're going to graduate. Those are all goals headed toward an objective out there that is probably unknown to you right now, but you know something's going to come about, and you're preparing for whatever that is, emotionally, spiritually, physically. All of that is coming together as a part of your tools that you're going to use to accomplish your goal ultimately in life. And then you can make your contributions back to all of those that have helped you require the required education.
All right. Did you expect your children to go into the same career as you? If not, explain.
Okay. No, I really did not expect that. They were very, very much exposed to the space program because we live close enough to NASA site here that whenever we did test firings of the rocket engines, the windows in our house would rattle. And, so because this was all a part of what was happening in Huntsville. So all of the people that lived here and were involved, we knew that all of our kids would not go into the space program. But we were trying to prepare them for something, whatever it might be. It may be in the nursing field, it may be doctors, it may be scientists, it may be artists, any of that. And so I never tried to push them into a particular arena or a particular avenue that would lead to the space program, but I just wanted them to be equipped for life and whatever life presented to them. So we have an architect, we have someone that's still involved in the educational world at Samford University. We have someone that is working in private industry that is now involved in the space program, but that individual is just a piece of, again, a big team that is meeting goals.
Okay. And if you did have a kid or know somebody, a young adult that would like to go into the same career as you, what advice would you give them?
My advice to them would be to volunteer as you're coming through your teenage years. Volunteer to do helpful things for other people and for your community and or church and or school and or whomever is close by where you can volunteer, because you're always going to learn something if you're on a job. You may not get paid much. It might be a volunteer that you don't get paid anything, but you still are acquiring skills about working with people and knowing that all of that comes together eventually to go benefit our society as a total working environment of progress toward the future.
Okay, so all in all, can you describe the most memorable workday for you?
I think one of the most memorable work days, well, I'd have to say twofold. One was when we were at the Cape and all my family was there, and we got to see the launch of the 3 astronauts going to the moon. And we got to see the successful completion of that. The other one was after those 3 astronauts came back from space, they made a worldwide tour. And during that worldwide tour, they went to Russia. And while they were in Russia, our astronauts interfaced and became somewhat friendly with the cosmonauts out of Russia. And so our astronauts invited the Russian cosmonauts to come to the United States and visit, and they did. And whenever they came to the United States, the astronauts brought them to Huntsville, and I was involved with being able to put an American astronaut in an American-made pressure suit, put a cosmonaut in an American-made pressure suit, and we got to conduct a test of those two playing sort of follow the leader, or tag, if you will, step by step by step. We had a Russian interpreter that would interpret from English to Russian so that the cosmonaut could understand, what was happening, and that was a very exciting day. And to me, it was sort of the full circle of what this space program was all about. We had influenced a neighboring country at which we were in opposition to each other. We had different principles. We treated our people differently. But yet here we were in one spot at one time, and we were able to make friends, I would say. And the cosmonaut name was Shevestyanov, and I'll frequently think about him and wonder how he finished out his career, and how what he saw in the United States may have influenced his thinking about some things that they might could do in Russia for those people that were pretty oppressed at that point in time. That's a couple of examples.
All right, thank you.